Hello, everybody, and welcome to Segue Saturday, number 13, Dark Denizens of the Spiritual World. Today, we're going to be talking about things that are, but things we've come across that are dangerous. There are so many of them out there that we've decided that Joel and I are going to go back to calling them. Diane concurs on this one. What we used to call them when we were kids in the 1980s, and we're just going to reach into the Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual and Monstrous Compendium and go, "Yep, that one looks like it," so we're going to call it that. So if you don't like that specification, too bad, because it's the easiest thing that we'd ever found to do when we were children. And yes, they stole it for that show, Stranger Things, but we were doing it first, so there. Now, to spend just a couple of seconds today on our fantastic sponsor, our first sponsor, Montana Ranch Emu. Nothing in the world better than emu oil for heart health, healing skin issues and wounds in animals and humans. And if you use this channel specifically code, when you make an account and order, you can get 10% off your first shipment of products, SG206. Remember, that's Montana Ranch Emu. Just follow the code. And by the way, I can tell you from firsthand experience, there's nothing like it for healing any kind of a wound, whether it's a second-degree burn or it's a gigantic cut or gouge in the side of your leg. I've used it on everything, and it's also amazing for making your skin look younger. Taken internally, it is the richest source of all essential fatty acids and non-essential, which they're now finding that omega-7 is key to keeping you looking younger longer. And we can't get it from vegetable sources because our bodies can't convert omega-7 into an active omega-7 unless it's straight off active from the beginning. And there's also one of the richest source of alpha lipoic and vitamin A, preformed A, which means it's good for your eyes. So give them a look. Take a look at the website. You'd be amazed how fantastic this stuff is. And remember that the products are actually renewable resource grade, which means that we use 97% of all the products that we grow on the ranch. So you guys can unmute yourselves. Thank you all for coming. Zephora, I think she thought we were going to be on Sunday today. How you feeling, Diane?
I'm groovy.
Especially after yesterday. Nothing like busting ghosts, huh?
Oh, yeah, that was fun.
Welcome,
Busting
Joel. We
ghosts
haven't
is
seen you so
mean.
long.
I know, it's been like 2 weeks, a week.
So some of the things we're going to talk about today were some of the denizens that we've encountered, and I figured I should probably start with Joel because Joel has his own things that he's bumped into since after we stopped collaborating, and I figured we'll go in that order.
Oh, not really much, just some shadow things here and there. It's so funny. There's I've noticed, we was talking about corners at one time. Were we talking about corners? We were talking about corners with somebody, how the corners and how they meet in a three-dimensional world. It's not exactly how they meet in different planes of existence.
In fourth and fifth dimensional worlds, yeah, because for when you look at them that way through astral sight and through psychic perception, you realize that they don't really come together like that, and it's more like a door because everything leaves this plane at right angles, and that's how they come through.
Yeah, so I've noticed. I was working and somebody had their hoodie hung up in the side over by near a corner. It wasn't exactly on the corner. It was like on the wall about a foot or two away from the corner. And this thing gave the like you could walk through there and your peripheral vision would catch it. But even if your peripheral vision didn't catch it or you knew it was over there, it still gave most of the people that walked over there, most of the nurses, the heebie-jeebies. And it was so funny because everybody was had made a comment on it. And of course, the first time I ran into it, I was all like, what was it? The Babadook. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but there's a scene where some of these shadow densings things like to set up in dark corners, especially if there's something over there that they can kind of hide in. I was telling my one friend how that's not an uncommon thing. And because when you look over there, they try to recede into it, and you have to pull them back into that light so you can, get them captured so you can really see what's going on. But they don't really like that, and they kind of force their way away from you. So, Yeah, that's lately though most of the thing that I've been dealing with. That and oh, when you came up, was it 2 years ago? You remember all the shadows that was actually physically moving all the trees and stuff?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everything else was still, but
not just moving the trees, but kicking the leaves on the ground. It's like, do you hear all that? Is that my imagination? No, I shouldn't have brought the staff. Should have brought something a little bit more portable.
Yeah.
You wanted me to take it easy on him. The staff is like a shotgun.
I was just curious of what's going on. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that especially in this area, that I deal with. And you remember the tree? You remember I took the picture of the tree and I showed everybody the tree.
Yeah.
And then you was here and you saw the tree.
Well, the tree's not a dark denizen, so presenting it like that's going to make people think the tree is bad.
Denizen, but it was just the other thing I ran into was the tree, the guardian in the tree that actually influenced where that limb grew to look like a maiden looking over the spillway, which is really cool.
Hi, Aisha.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Ready. Yes.
Okay. I miss you.
I miss y'all too. I was wondering what was going on. I wasn't getting my invites for some reason.
We were putting them into, because I was putting them into the group thing. I hadn't known that you'd left the group, so I was trying to send everything to you so that you could get them all together. But when you left it, I didn't know that you'd left it because there were so many messages in that one, because there's like 7 people in the group. I didn't know that one person had left. Sonia eventually left and then came back too, because Sephora had to bring her back. So okay, so Diane,
that's right.
Go for to tell us about some of the fun things you've been dealing with lately.
Oh God, all kinds of things. Like you mean the big thing that was in the sewer?
Yeah,
that we spent ages trying to figure out. Well, that thing was huge, though. That wasn't just and very tricky and like to hide. We had a while ago, we had the sewers backing up, and people were finding chunks of dark, thick, long, fuzzy hair, and we're like, what the heck, because nobody has that kind of hair here. And we were trying to figure this out, and everybody was having problems, all kinds of problems. So much so that one of my neighbors just kind of got tired of living here and went screaming into the night, moving to another apartment before her lease was even up. And I kept trying to here, it turns out I was taking care of the symptoms. I didn't know there was this main thing. It was keeping me distracted. And as it was keeping me distracted, people were getting sick. All kinds of things were happening here that weren't really right. And I finally, Sean kind of backed things back a little bit, backed things off a little bit by doing his thing, his kind of thing that he does.
Basically learning some stuff from watching shows and making the astral sort of rewind in front of our eyes, which is the closest thing I've got to divination, so that I could see what was going on. It's like, oh, look, they're all sort of like popping backwards out of the drain. What the hell's with the drain? You having me set up defenses everywhere in your house, but you can't really defend a drain. You can't defend a drain. Okay. It's got to have out.
Very hard. Yes. It's hard to defend a drain. I had put guards around every opening in the place, just in case. And I mean, around the bathtub drain, around the sink drain, around everything I put up, and around the door as well. And there were these 2 beings that were always in the front yard, and I couldn't get them. And this is really weird for me. I'd get rid of them and they come back, get rid of them. They come back, get rid of them. What the heck is going on? And Ian said that means they're being remote controlled by somebody. They're not really there. They're somebody sending that in. It's not it's a mental thing. It's like, oh, okay.
It's a sending.
Yeah.
Sendings.
Yeah, because it wasn't, it's like when I get rid of something, it goes. It's like this was really freaking me out. It was near another opening. See, there had been a fountain there, and they closed that off, but still, it's another way uh, down into the sewer system. So finally, it's like, ah, the sewer. It's got to be something with the sewer. Back to that again, because I mean, I thought that at first, but then all this other stuff was going on. Turns out that was a distraction. And there was also stuff hanging around the perimeter because we staked the place off and cordoned the place off. And still, there was stuff hanging around the perimeter of the place that I kept having to shoo away. Different stuff every time, but stuff. And I'm like, okay, something's wrong here. Something's anchoring this here. So I finally got the idea this has got to be the sewer, something in the sewer. So I said, hey, Sean, you want to go looking around in the sewer and see what's down there? It'll be kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. He goes, no, I don't think I'll fit. And besides, it's bound to be pretty yucky. I said, well, okay, maybe I can do this some other way. So I got Azor to do it, which is one of my friends, one of my spirit friends. And I said, Azor, can you take care of whatever is down there? And he said, yeah, because I tried to go there. I tried to remote view, and it made me nauseous. It was making me sick to try and even see what was going on there, see what was in there. And so after a little while, I mean, he just disappeared into the ground. And then when he popped back up, with this thing that it was huge, and it had claws and teeth as big as a person. Yeah, I mean, it was huge. It was absolutely like a building sized thing. And I'm like, holy cow, what? He's, what the heck? I'm thinking, what is that thing? And he says, well, could you just open the portal so I could throw it through? Yeah, it's like, yes, so he's saying bigger, 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 bigger. Open this thing, I opened it as big as a 747, and he threw it in, and it's snarling as I'm like, oh God. And as soon as it went through, things were better. Boom. And never saw those two out by the ring again. And Sean checks, and he goes, oh my God, it's clear. I don't feel like I gotta stake the place down anymore.
Oh, the corners, staking down the corners, because it kept on sending something into the house to rip it up, sort of like putting down wallpaper, and these things were eating the wallpaper off the corners. It's like, the heck, I just cleaned this.
Yeah.
Right. It was really
Hi,
wild.
Sephora.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, it was a wild time for a while there until we figured it out. It was pretty interesting. And then really once we got it figured out, all it took was, Azor going down there and just grabbing it, because he can do that. I couldn't have done that, though. I'm not sure I could have held it. And Sean, I hate to say, I'm not sure.
I probably could have, but going down there was not something I could do. Going into the ground, into the earth, is not something I can accomplish. Not without
I'm
pictures.
sure.
I need pictures. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been terribly impossible. It's I mean, the stuff we were doing the other day was well, we'll talk about that one towards the end of the show.
Right, we'll say that again. We'll talk about that later, but yeah, this was something. See, I realized later I wouldn't have been able to see anything down there either, because it would be dark and I would only have to sense it. So maybe, that wouldn't even be a thing, but obviously.
Yeah, you don't want to bird box yourself in with a monster.
No. So Azor took care of grabbing it, and then I took care of opening the portal, because I do the opening and closing of portals. That's what I do. One of my main specialties, although I can do all kinds of things, but that's a specialty of mine. And he threw it through, and everything just started to clear up after that.
Aisha, sorry, Aisha, what kind of creatures have you dealt with?
None lately. It's been
No,
peaceful.
In your past, dear.
Well, just the ones I got you to take care for me.
Well,
you know.
this is
So
this is for the show to tell people about the weird stuff that you've encountered. We try to put it into a little chestnut box so people can grab a hold of it and see, it's not abnormal to deal with X. So tell us about it.
well, we had the ex-owner of the house that I was living in that actually didn't want me there. That's when I met you to help you for you to help me get him off me, because he's the one who made me start catching those seizures and stuff, because he would keep me up all night. Anytime I go to sleep, he used to grab my feet and wake me up or whatever, he whisper in my ear and stuff and just make me catch a heart attack most of the time. I had to find you online in order to actually get somebody to help me. I thought I was going crazy in there, and then I moved out of that house and came here, and it was a bit peaceful until my dad passed away, and then he started messing with me, and I I had to come get you again. I'm sorry to keep calling you, but and then you answer the phone in the middle of the night too. I'm like, oh Lord, I hate to do this to him, but I'm scared something is going on in here. And when you told me my dad was in there and Jemima was, getting him out the house, I was like, okay, at least I know something is in here. And, you told me she put a safety seal over the door so he can't come back again. And then I had the problem with the goats, the little goat thing that you said was in my house.
The girl with the little girl who dropped off.
The little girl who knew voodoo. She was playing with my children and was upset I wouldn't let them go swimming back to back 2 and 3 days in a row. So she wished I was dead and then left this goat in my house. And I kept hearing the footsteps, and I can see it out the corner of my eye. Kept running to the side there, and I was like, what is going on? I thought it was my children playing with me, and I kept running to the front room, and I was like, what are y'all doing? They said, no, it's not us, we're not doing anything. And when I said, I gotta call, I hate to do this to him, because it was still the middle of the night again, and I'm like, oh man, I hate to do this to this guy, but I got to call him, because I'm not gonna I won't be able to get no sleep with this thing keep on running after me around the house. And it kept on getting closer and closer the more I turned my back, and I can hear it running. And I call you and I tell you what's going on, and I can hear these footsteps and everything. And you afterwards you say, wait a minute, I need you to be quiet, because I kept on texting back and forth to you. I need you to be quiet. Yes, something is in your house. I'm fighting this thing here. Hold on a second. I'm like, oh, okay. And when you explained to me what was going on, I said, well, how did he get in here? You said, Jemima put the seal up. You let them in there. You let the little girl in there. So that's how he got in there. And when you explained to me what was going on, you say, so wait a minute, how many footsteps did you hear? I say, it sounded like both of my daughters were running after me. Say, it's because it was a goat. That's the reason why. It's like a 4-legged animal here running after you. And I was like, okay.
I'm still curious. I'm still very curious how the girl managed to, number one, create it, but number two, give it enough energy that when it realized it was being confronted, that it decided to stand up and look like a demon, which it did. It stood up and went full Skeletor. I'm like, whoa, it's a demon. Somebody's gonna think I'm crazy because I've been watching too much Ghost Adventures. Zach has finally pervaded my brain. But no, it was putting on a front. And when I started to tussle with it, it was like cardboard. I'm like, damn, this is the most fragile demon I've ever. Oh, it's not a demon. Which was when I told Aisha, I said it was fronting. It was trying to pretend like it was something it wasn't. So that was pretty funny. I actually went in loaded for bear, and then I realized it's like, oh, I broke it. And
well, at least it wasn't like the cat.
Well, I didn't attack the cat. You guys never let me live down the cat. So you don't have a cat. The cat didn't attack me neither. It just kept looking at me. It's like, I think I like the fact that you're walking through here. It's like, how can you see me?
Are you saying that the goat was trying to be big and bad?
Yes.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I felt a little sheepish. It's
Oh,
I didn't mean to wreck it so bad. I mean, first of all, I was like, I'm gonna take you out of the house, like I did with Aisha's the Frenchie ghost that was coming after her where she used to live. I grabbed him by the lapels because he was wearing a greatcoat. Was gorgeous too. I mean, the guy was dressed to the nines. He looked like something that stepped right out of the 1700s. It was amazing, and I go to drag the thing out by its horns, and one of them broke off in my hand. I thought, oh shit, I broke it.
Oops, I broke it.
It's like, what the hell just happened? I wasn't trying, and it kept on pawing at me, and I thought, it's not even really landing any blows at all, because unlike with that Cobalt thing the other day, that thing was making sparks on my armor, on the armor of light. I was like, oh yeah, go ahead, have a chew on me, boys. But this thing, it was like being pawed at like a kitten without claws. So I was like, wow, I think I'm overreacting. But you really can't blame me, because I've been watching too damn much Ghost Adventures. I was like, yes, it's a ghost. You have to be careful, because some of that stuff does seep into your consciousness. It's embarrassing.
Well, it's like the other day, like you said, we were going in with elephant guns, and it was really all we needed was a rabbit.
We were hunting rabbits with an elephant gun.
We were hunting rabbits with an elephant gun.
Zephora, sorry for talking over you, dear. So you have a story?
No. Oh, you weren't talking over me. I just forgot to mute my mic. I was asking my son if he had fed the cat. Yeah, I have. I mean, I've encountered some bad things in my life, but it was only during a certain time in my life. Because I used to live with a person who would just attract them like crazy. And I guess because he was such a negative person, he would just they just fed off of him, and they would just follow him wherever he went. And like I remember when I first met him, I had to drive down to California. He gave me something, an object, and when I drove back to Oregon, I was like, there is like a giant winged gargoyle on the top of my car, like all the way back. And like, that is weird. And he had tried to tell me, oh, that's a guardian trying to make sure you get back safe. But it was actually a guardian of his object, because he was very object oriented. Like he's just always about his stuff and not about people. And so it was guarding the object that he had given me. And then what else? There was a point in time where our relationship was really starting to get like bad. And there was this one night where there was a thing in the house, and it was maybe like 4 feet tall, and it was kind of like this imp kind of creature, like almost like a golem from Lord of the Rings, right? But more creaturey and not as human like. And it did not like me. And I know, Sean, you said that that's because I could see it, and I had to die. And it wanted to kill me. It had it out for me. And we were sleeping together in one of the bedrooms, and he got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. And this thing was in the hallway. And the only reason it wouldn't touch me is because he was in the bedroom. And as soon as he left the room, I could tell it was like, all right, now's my chance. I got to get her. And the feeling just was building and building. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And so I got up and I went out of the room to go to the bathroom where he was, to just wait outside. And as soon as I got out in the hallway, it started hobble running at me. And I was like, ah! And I like ran. And he was just opening the door as I got to the bathroom, and I just clung to him, and I was shaking, and I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, what's wrong? And I told him, and he just like didn't even care. And I'm like, oh my God. And the thing just sort of lurked out there. And then a day or two later, this guy and I had like the biggest fight ever. It was bad. I don't usually fight with people like this. It was bad. And I think this thing had something to do with that. And then when this guy left, I had a dream that he came back, and there was this Japanese woman with him, and she had really long, straight black hair, and she wore a mask, and she just silently followed him everywhere. And it was really creepy. And he didn't know she was there, but I could see her. And he did come back to get all his stuff. And there was something following him, just feeding off of him, and he didn't even know it was there. And I was like, oh my God, it's the Japanese lady in the mask. I don't know what kind of creature that would be.
It's a Japanese version of a vampire. They usually keep their faces covered and their hands covered because you find out that their hands are on backwards.
That I didn't even see her hands in the dream, so yeah, maybe that sounds about right. Also,
you know what's
right?
the creepiest? I'm sorry. You know what the creepiest
go ahead.
about this is that how much reading I've done to know about this stuff, and then those things are actually close cousins to the Rakshasa. They're just, it's horrifying when you're near them. You don't realize that their limbs are on backwards, etc. They use heavy clothing to cover it, and
she had like a long shirt or something on.
It's not so scary watching them in movies like The Ring or whatever, because it's really quite hilarious the way they present it. I know for some cultures it's terrifying, but the real thing, when you're really in the presence of it, it doesn't come across so corny and trite. It really can scare the knickers right off most people, because they're just the way they move is horrifyingly disjointed.
She just kind of like float walked behind him, but like it was more like the Grudge kind of like creepy woman.
Yeah.
But she had a mask on. And what was interesting was my wife moved in with us right before he left, and because she was just new to town, and like she was staying in the other bedroom, and there were like these, I don't know if it was good or bad, but there were like little creatures in there. You could hear like paper crunching and things, like little things falling over, like there were little like gnomes or something living in there, like walking around all the time. It was weird. It was so weird. I don't know what those were, but it was like there was just creatures and beasties all over the place. And also the townhouse where we lived before we moved to this apartment, that had a lot of, I want to say, like just evil ghosts in it. And I don't know that was necessarily attributed to him. That was just, there were some scary creatures, but when I first went to go look at the place, there was a steep staircase right at the front, like in front of the front door going to the second floor. And, and there's this guy standing at the top of the stairs saying, "Get out." And I was just like, no, we're alive and we need a place to live. And this place has great rent, so no. And we moved in, and they didn't give us too much trouble. But like, I remember one night, the light was out in the second bedroom where it was like the baby's room, but he actually slept in our room, and the light was out. But I was like, well, I'm just going to change his diaper by the light coming from the hallway. And my son wasn't afraid of anything, right? I mean, he laughed at danger, like literally laughed at scary things and laughed at danger. He wasn't afraid of anything. And so I'm changing his diaper, and he's looking over my shoulder. I felt something really bad appear behind me, like really, really bad. And I just got those like pricklies, like, oh my God, there's like a demon behind me. And he's looking over my shoulder, and he just gets this look of like horror on his face. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's grab everything and grab the baby and run downstairs. Like, nope, 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 nope. If he's afraid, this thing must be really bad. And and his first real sentence to me when he was 3 was, the ghosts in the old house used to scare me. I was like, me too, buddy, me too. Okay, so those are mostly my encounters of bad stuff.
All right, so I'm gonna set the Wayback Machine now for Joel and I. We're going to be going back to the very beginning for us. Got to remember that at this point in time, Diane has just had her close encounter with death, and Joel and I have just met. And the first dark thing that we discovered that wasn't a ghost. Joel, do you remember it?
I'm assuming you're either talking about the one at my friend's house or the thing at the apartments.
No, before that. Before that. Okay, so I'm going to have to draw your mind back to it. You're like, Sean, I don't feel so good on my back. Can you check my back? And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at you, and it's like, oh my God, Joel. You look like now for the people who have ever watched the movie Ice Pirates, it's a classic. It looked like Joel had been afflicted by space herpes. What's that? Space herpes.
Yes.
Oh, one of my favorites. Now, we didn't call it that because that lacks class, but it's looked similar. Now, what it looked more closely to, however, was in a movie that was done by forgotten the name of the company, but it was based on H.P. Lovecraft, and it was the From Beyond with Jeffrey Combs. Oh my God, the legendary Jeffrey Combs.
That was a great show.
Oh, that was an amazing movie. And we got turned to a lot of knowledge there because even though H.P. Lovecraft was a wacko and definitely off his meds because they didn't exist at the time, he did have some insight into things that disturbed him that he saw. And these things looked like what we call them leeches. Pulling the darn things off was not pleasant. I have the nursing touch of a troll. So Joel always would grit his teeth like, yeah, just get them off, because me pulling them off was not pleasant, but if he got them off, it was much easier. So hence Joel much better at nursing than Sean is. So don't ask me to do anything more than wrap bandages on things. Okay.
Fair enough.
So, and that was one of our first things that we'd ever encountered. And they come in varying sizes, but they always seem to do the same thing. They're here to feed. They're here to feed on everything. Auras, they attach to auras, hold on real tight, siphon and feed, but they don't have stomachs really. They don't bloat. So it would take years before we found out that they're like a communal creature. They send the energy to something else. Now, this isn't the only way these things can feed, but this is primarily the way we found that these things do feed. And they send the energy to a large Jabba the Hutt looking thing that's hidden itself somewhere far, far away, if it can. And when Joel and I would go exploring, we would go through these things and they would stick on. Or if we accidentally went astral projecting, which is another reason why we say it's not so safe, these things would attach themselves in our sleep, and then we'd wake up and, oh yeah, this thing's chewing under my right shoulder blade. Can you please get it off? Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. How could you forget that?
I could never forget them. So do you remember any other of the minor denizens and creatures we encountered in the beginning?
And in the beginning, wow, the most thing I can remember is the leeches, because that seemed to be everywhere. But there was those eyeball things, like the Watchers. Yeah, those were fine.
And we never figured out who was sending those things. These giant eyeball things looked like a Dianoga had its eye stalk cut off and it was flying around. For people who don't know what a Dianoga is, it's in Star Wars when Luke gets pulled into the fluid underneath in the trash compactor. The thing that grabbed the hold of him was called a Dianoga. They basically feed on leftover bits of material, organic material, etc. And they were actually purposely put into the Death Star in order to be able to eat leftover things, almost like they're trying to be, I guess, biologically responsible and recycle as much as possible. But yeah, these things would be flying all over the place, and we never tracked it down to who was sending the things out.
Yeah, that was, I seem to remember that. And then, of course, there was a fairy circle. I mean, that's not a dark denizen, but I mean,
and remember the things that looked like jellyfish that would float around.
Oh yeah,
Never really able to get close to those things, but they they seem to dance on a breeze that you couldn't see, and they would stay out of the way. We took pot shots at them to try and see if we could knock one down so that we could get closer to it, on this plane. And if you chased after them on the astral, they just disappeared, almost like they were pulling a whole dimension in front of our eyes, so we couldn't see where they were going.
Yeah.
And so if you see these things out of the corners of your eyes, it's not like you're imagining things. We've been there and we've done that, and we've seen that probably worse. But I'm trying to throw out as many of these memories of dark denizens we've come across as possible. Shadow persons as well.
Oh yeah, the shadow people. That's recent.
And shadow we actually found out that shadow persons they don't have to be dead folk. They can be living folk. They can be folk who have had traumatic experiences, which it also gives rise to the whole Horcrux thing that J.K. Rowling put into her. You don't have to kill anything also for that to occur. Just, you'd be a heavy drug user, and people can splinter themselves. Pardon me, could splinter themselves, fracture their soul, and leave pieces of themselves floating around.
That was a very musical sounding, Sean. You should work on that.
Sorry, my sinuses are just killing me this morning. We're having rain galore for the next week, and so everything is pollinating up here. It wants to survive.
I want to ask you something. Have you ever seen, and I figured out this was actually a pun. We were finding these flesh-colored things that looked sort of like crabs on people. Big. And they'd be walking around and stuff. Have you ever seen those? I figured out what those are. And they would make this sound. Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
They were ticks.
Yeah. Those were those are like, only time I've ever had to deal with one of those. And that's, oh man, it was like, but they have more legs than a tick. It's almost like they're a cross between somebody smashed a trilobite into a tick. They've got so many more legs, almost like a sand crab, but worse.
Yeah.
And they're like lice, hideous things. I've only encountered them twice, and that was only in the last 6 years.
Yeah, those were horribly common. And then there are the tentacle-y things that attach to people that'll daisy chain all over your body if you let them go. Those things are pretty nasty. Some people swear that's the tentacles or the AI, but I don't know about that. Whatever they are, they're nasty. And we had a heck of a time getting rid of those for a while.
One of the people we've been consulting with us actually says that she saw spider webs all over things when certain things would come through her, and we realized it was one part background count and one part something had left stagnant energy in the area that needed to be cleared out. Where she lived was not exactly ideal. Fortunately, it became a moot point because she no longer lives there, but it was not a safe place for her to be with her family. And this is something we're encountering, is that either if you're gifted, you tend to get to us a little bit faster. If you're not gifted, it takes quite a bit longer because you tend to listen to folk that tell you, oh, it's all in your head, it's not real, blah, blah. Fill in the blank. It usually, and then of course there'll be the folk who tell themselves, well, maybe I'm just blowing out of proportion. Trust me, it's better to deal with it right away. It's like if you see one cockroach in the house, there's 500. Let us come in before it becomes 1 million.
Yeah.
Exactly. If I see anything like that, it's like I hunt it and kill it right now. I don't let anything. But there are a lot of little things. Did you ever know? Well, you must have noticed how many of them are parasites.
Almost all of them seem to be some version of that. Very rarely do I come across hunters. The one time that Joel and I dealt with a Wendigo, it was after me, and it was specifically after me because it was being channeled at me. As Joel said, it was weird. Sorry, by the thing that in Wales that wanted me. It wanted me weakened, but it didn't realize that once you get to a point where you don't care if you live or die, the Wendigo has no power over you. I wasn't afraid of death. You have to be scared. and I wasn't scared anymore. I was scared in the beginning, but I used to ride my bike through the Boise Cascade Park. I turned off the light and then just use astral sight. And there's no lights in this park. I'm riding on the bike path with my eyes closed, going, okay, come and get me. And by the time you get to that point, the Wendigo has no power to do anything to you. And I was ready for it. I said, I was actually to the point where I had become so depressed, I was ready for death.
All right, Crazy Horse. You realize Crazy Horse was a shaman who employed a very similar technique.
No, I didn't.
Yes. Legendarily, Crazy Horse would ride into battle on a pony in the midst of gunshot, facing backwards on his horse, right? He'd ride on a horse backwards into battle and come out without a scratch.
Well, no, I didn't know that, but if I had, it would have been cooler, I guess, if I was riding the bicycle backwards with my eyes closed in the dark.
I mean,
but just the same, I don't have that level of coordination, but I came close.
The thing is, it freaks people out, and it freaks out all the dark stuff too. It's like they're like, "Oh, poop emoji," right?
Yeah.
Oh no, here comes one. Whoa,
This one's crazier than we are.
The same technique. Crazier than us. Oh, we better watch it. Now they're scared, right? Yeah.
That reminds me. I mean, it wasn't a dark entity, but I was walking through a park and there had been an incident where two like drunk, angry homeless guys had been shouting at each other. And then I left that area. I was walking through the park and one of the homeless guys started walking towards me, and he just looked like he was on the warpath. Like he had targeted me. He was going to start messing with me. And I just instantly threw up this energy shield that's just like locked down, boom. And I kept walking and he just stopped and he's like, whoa. And then he like went in another direction. I was like, that's right. Not today.
You got to remember that people who are on a lot of drugs, alcohol, or whatever, they're very easily manipulable. So it might have been something decided to use him like a sock puppet.
Maybe.
So, that's a common thing out there. Joel and I have definitely encountered it.
I'm sorry, the image that comes to mind.
Some people are meat puppets.
Yeah. Oh.
So, sir, do you identify as human? No, I am a meat popsicle.
Yeah.
So now, Joel, remember when you came back from you had your first furlough and you're coming to California. You was like, yeah, we're going to look around and there's places in PV, and because there's supposed to be these things around that old church that's up there. And we drove up and there was the Banshee. I'm like, put it in reverse, Joel.
Yeah. Oh, God. I try to wipe that from my memory.
When you think about a Banshee and the hair standing up, and it's like, well, if this wasn't a real Banshee, because of course Banshee is really a fae spirit, this is just a screaming, I guess, like you call it La Llorona, the crier, and it really looks just like you anticipate, hair standing up, like the librarian freaking out in the Ghostbusters, get her, Ray.
Yeah, God,
yeah, Joel and I, it's like, oh, we've seen this movie. Put it in reverse, Joel.
I had to bring that one back up. Yeah,
but you need to make sure the kids see Ice Pirates, with the little rock thing coming out. So, here's me wiping my hand off on Joel.
Yeah.
It's that kind of, and you come across stuff too. There's these things that once they've fed, we've now found that they will leave deposits of really disgusting material. But in the past, before we started coming across this black tarry stuff, we would find things that had fed that would leave spidery, wispy stuff, gelatinous, I guess you'd say ectoplasm, but it moves way too easily, almost like because ectoplasm's kind of stern, and this stuff wasn't. It would flow too easily, like a jelly donut filling.
Ah!
That kind of thing.
So gross.
Can I say I
not
have
fun.
seen spider holes though, astrally? There was a place that I'm like, why am I getting this feeling like what is he, and my friend goes, take a look at this place. And I look and it's like we're in a cave, actually in a cave with and spider webs all over the place. And I'm like, holy cow. How did, you know, this was actually my mother's place. And I'm like, this is horrible.
Hmm.
No wonder we're having problems here all the
Yeah,
time.
really.
Mhm.
You were going to say something, Joel?
No, no, no.
One of the more common events when you have an uncomfortable home or you start to feel something, the very first moment that you do, you really should have someone come and look at it, because that usually is not when the thing arrives. That's the point at which you're no longer able to ignore it. Sort of like that point where you don't realize something's sawing on your leg until, oh yeah, now we've hit bone.
Yeah, it's just basically that isn't just a normal itch. That's something biting me.
Yeah.
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 It at the point where it really gets its tentacles into you and it's really siphoning or it's really doing something. Most of them are parasitic in nature. And that's the point where the anchor is now well set in you and you just don't know how to shake it off. And there's some things you could have done before you got to that point without having to call us in, but usually that's once you become that aware of it, it's game on. And then you have to have us come in there with our elephant guns. Sorry, I can't be.
That's really
I
with
can't
my
be.
Spirit magic helmet.
Spirit magic helmet, and I'm going to show you. Oh, it was. So that leads us up to what happened. We can't name names, but what happened to Diane and I the other day. We both were consulting and trying to help out a person in a situation, and found that there was a thing that was running I guess you call it a racketeering situation for energy in a
Yeah,
person's home.
pretty much.
And it was, we're just going to call it the Cobalt, because that's
Yeah,
essentially what it looks like.
Yeah.
And the thing was feeding on the entire family. Now you can't let this go on, because health declines in a major way. Diseases come in. You start seeing if you have a bad situation, it becomes worse. If you have a not so bad situation, it can become very eccentric very quickly. And people who deal with issues can suddenly find themselves going from I'm gifted to having a diagnosis of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that that's how schizophrenia works, because I know there are people who really do have schizophrenic events, and they are schizophrenic. But you can have a person who's gifted and their talents are raw and untamed, and the next thing you know, that they're having dementia, they're having physical conditions, epilepsy, like what was going on with Aisha, where the thing just keeps on eating and eating and eating, and you are a source of food. And if you use stuff like different things to lock out energy, like frankincense to purify the house, etc., you cut off a source of their food, and then they get really mad and they have to do what's next best. Like
That's what happened.
It's like trying to feed a tiger bread. You're just going to piss it off.
Yeah, this thing was when I had gotten called in first, and I looked around and I told her, hey, I'm seeing a shadow person and an old man and an old woman. And yeah, and she's like, oh, that's odd. I haven't seen any phenomena, but my daughter talks about seeing shadow people. It's like, she wasn't listening. She really wasn't listening to the family. And her father or grandpa had seen stuff too, had been not able to sleep there. They'd heard growling. And the guinea pigs would go off on a regular basis that were kept down there. And then they died mysteriously. And I'm there, you know, this should have been all kinds of alarms, but we're so trained to ignore all that stuff. You know, I mean, and then her daughter was sleeping. This was where her daughter slept, for God's sake, in this area. I wouldn't want anybody to sleep there. I mean,
Now,
I
one of the
wouldn't let
things
my
that
dog sleep down there.
one of the things that I think is a commonality is that, you know, people say, well, they feel ill at ease going into a basement or going underground, right? I've never really had that problem. It's only been when there's something there with me. And it's it's hard to explain to people that sometimes well, most of the time you feel ill at ease going into an environment. It's because your gut is telling you something, and your gut, as I've said on many occasions, is your first, even for a person who's not gifted, their first warning that you've now gotten into well, to quote Indiana Jones' father, Junior, we're pilgrims in an unholy land, and it's time to stop. And it's like, nope, turn around, go back the way we came. So once you're in that, you're now exposed to whatever it is that's down there, and the feeling will get worse and worse and worse, and it'll just feel like something's clenching your guts up. If you learn to deal with that, eventually you can ignore it until eventually, like, oh well, it's just in my head. You can convince yourself of a lot of things, and you can deal with
like a frog in a pot, right? And
yeah.
the heat keeps turned up, and then pretty soon the frog is cooked. If you don't pay attention, your frog will be cooked. Mm-hmm.
Because the human condition is we can deal with almost anything, really abusive environments, really abusive people, really abusive things, and we just keep on resetting our whole idea of what is normal, and we just adapt.
We adapt.
But it doesn't mean that it stops being a hot pot that you're sitting in and it's boiling.
Right.
You were going to say something, Joel?
No, I was like, yeah. And I was just caught a yawn. Sorry.
Yeah, because adaptation is one of the things that people are really good at. I mean, they can adapt their heads, they can adapt their emotions, they can adapt even our bodies. We adapt. We are great at adapting, and that's something nature does too, is adapt, right?
Yeah.
And so we can kid ourselves if we have enough cognitive dissonance that nothing is going on here. Move along, there's nothing to see. Oh, really? Until it's really bad. Exactly.
And you're trying to convince yourself that it's not Friday the 13th, it's actually Saturday the 14th. Yes, that's a show series. Sean Astin was in it, you know, from the Goonies. Go ahead and watch it. It's funny.
It's pretty great.
But it's really actually Friday the 13th, and you're living the horror. So you've got to let the worries fall away. Come and find the people who really want to help you and end it, because with children, it really leaves a lasting impression. We actually covered this on at least 3 videos. When the children say something, do what Aisha did. Listen. Immediately. Go to it. Because Aisha, I want you to tell the audience what you did when your daughter was in trouble.
Okay, it takes me a minute to get to both of these mute buttons I have here. But when she told me that, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Am I unmuted? Okay. All right. When she told me that she saw something in the room and she was afraid to go in that room, I say, stand right there by the door and tell me where it is. She was pointing up towards the ceiling. And I went and got the broom. I said, I'm going to need a broom to sit up here and beat this thing up, you know. And I started swinging at it, beating it. I said, am I hitting it? Am I hitting it? And she was like, yeah. She just bust out laughing. Yeah, you hitting it. You hitting it. Just laughing. I tell her, I said, now get out of here and leave my daughter alone. I said, anytime they mess with you, you let me know. Mama going to beat them up for you. And she just bust out laughing. It made her feel comfortable. That way she was able to get some sleep. Other than that, she wasn't able to get no sleep. But I didn't make her go in that room at all. We slept in a different room. So that way she didn't have to worry about it being there either.
Bless you.
I did the best I could.
Now, I want to quote from a very wonderful novel, Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. The dark things come on winds that are blown about by nothing that brings anything good. By the printing of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. The dark people come from the cracks and the crevices. Where do they come from? Yesterday. Where do they go to? The awful tomorrow. They feed on our suffering. They butter their bread with our delicious pain. They find our tears, they suck them, and they find them sweet. Laughter is their destroyer. Follow the example of the children. I promise you, it'll never lead you wrong. So, thank you very much, everyone, and stay blessed until next we meet.